Now we're going to go over van use, and this is going to be about a half hour long. Um, Ideally, we also are going to get a couple practice driving rounds in, but right now we are just going to go over the basics of how to do it. The theory level. So staff has some responsibilities when it comes to the van in terms of cleanliness and making sure kids aren't eating in there and that we clean it up every day. Also, of course, like using the pre-trip checklist, which we're going to go over on the next slide, as well as ensuring that it's gassed up. So either letting the director of programming know, or ideally letting her know, and then when it's like a quarter tank full, grabbing the specific gas card that we use to purchase gasoline, and that's gonna, when we go to the pumps to fill up the vans, we have to use holiday stations for these cards. It's going to ask for your odometer readings. You might want to snag that ahead of time, as well as it's going to ask for the code that's on the back of the card, and that's taped on the back of the card. And then maintenance, if you ever see any lights come up on the dash, let the director of programming know right away. Returning the keys, I keep them, I can see them right here. They hang near the front door, and should be returned at the end of the workday. And then safety, and we're going to go into this quite a bit more. So like I said, this is the daily checklist, and before any day before you're traveling, you're looking, is my exterior okay? How am I on gasoline? Are my lights in the right working order? Mirrors, are those where I can see effectively? We're going to talk a little more about that. Are my blinkers working separate from my lights? Am I wearing my seatbelts? Are others wearing their seatbelts? And then how clean is the van, right? So you can kind of just do check marks. These are laminated pages, so you can wipe them clean at the end of the week. But this also you can initial, and it says like, I know that it was good on the day that I had it, right? Okay, so here's our always list. We'll just read through them. Okay, always review pre-checklist and notify appropriate person of any vehicle defects, which is usually going to be the director of programming. In the winter times, always clean snow, ice, and frost from all the windows. Always adjust your mirrors. You should barely be able to see the edge of the van with your side mirrors. So when you're adjusting them, you should just be able to see the edge of the van in your mirror and then the rest of it. And that's when you know you've got them in the right spot. Always secure loose items within the van so that they're not projectiles if you were to get into a crash, including finding trash or other things that could roll underneath your seat and interfere with the pedals, right? Always leave early to avoid being anxious or rushed or making mistakes. Always drive with headlights on, even if it's midday, helps with visibility. Just do it for safety. Always use the right-hand lane when possible. You should be scanning your mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds. Always being patient and courteous rather than aggressive. Having road rage or driving aggressively, or even speaking aggressively can be unsafe. It's going to reflect poorly on the Boys and Girls Club. And certainly as far as examples go, we have had folks call in and say, I just saw your blue Boys and Girls Club van, and they were cutting people off and they were shouting aggressively in the vehicle. So the community does notice what our staff are up to, and we want to be considerate about how we're being perceived when we are doing work for the Boys and Girls Club on behalf of club. Even if we don't have kids in the van, our vans are very identifiable, and that's a blessing and a curse, right? So we have to be conscientious of that. Always stop if fatigued. This especially applies to summer club driving if we're going on a longer road trip to a lake, an hour there, an hour back kind of thing. Always avoid backing up when possible. You might not know this, but apparently 70% of van crashes are from backing into a stationary object, and that's just probably because it's so big and so long. And though we have rear view mirrors and actually backup cams on our most of our vans, when we're backing in, or backing up, that's when we are most likely to hit something. So always try, if possible, to back in when you arrive rather than when you leave. And if you can, backing up to the left, to your side when possible, because you have most visibility there. I hope that makes sense. In as well, use your emergency flashers every time you're backing up in case there's someone back there, or other objects that it could reflect off of, and possibly a spotter. But if you do have a spotter to help you back up, make sure you coordinate your signals ahead of time. What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean, right? What symbols are they going to be using? So just a reminder there. Always buckle seatbelts, of course, before you drive away. Oftentimes with our kids, we do knucks for bucks, and they put their knucks up in the air once they have their buckles on. Ensure booster seats are used. So Montana state law is that any children under 6 years of age or under 60 pounds, and they would need to be over 7 and over 7, or over 60 pounds, to be able to be out of a booster seat, but they need to be sitting in that. Why is so that the seatbelt hits them in the right place. Otherwise, it might be kind of choking at the neck, and we want it to lay more comfortably across the chest. And I will just speak from experience here, though your kids initially might not want to be in booster seats, they're much more likely to wear their seatbelts once they do ride booster seats. And that's because it's just more comfortable. And you're going to get less instances of little kids putting them behind their heads because it's kind of inconveniently choking them at the neck. And then last one, always take a first aid kit, and there should be one in the I'm trying to say glove box. There we go. As well as always take your emergency contact list, and you might just have access to this digitally. So it clicks with the last one here. Have a working cell phone in the vehicle somewhere with you. Okay, so when we're driving vans, it's similar to driving cars, but a little different. It's substantially longer and wider. So one, we need a bubble of space between us and other vehicles, right? So as much as you can, you're saving space behind when you're stopping behind cars or driving behind cars. We're going to talk a little about that more later. You can't really control the people that are driving behind you though, right? A next thing that's unique, you've got more weight in this vehicle. And so it is going to take longer to do things like maneuver, turn, switch lanes, as well as stop, especially if you're at a higher speed, especially in the summer, if we're driving on field trip and going on highway. Consider the more weight you've got, the more speed. That's a math equation right there. You're multiplying it, and it is going to take exponentially longer to stop that big thing. So consider, especially roundabouts, you need to slow way down. You're gonna have to crawl through a roundabout, or you're at risk of tipping the vehicle over and not being able to slow down in appropriate time, and running into objects, right? So it's very similar to regular cars, but when you're turning, give yourself extra time. If it's a red light and there's no cars for some distance, where you would definitely do it in your own personal vehicle, maybe you're not doing it in the van and you're waiting till it's a green light, right? Or as you're coming up on a vehicle, maybe you start slowing down way before the stoplight is happening, right? And then the third is accounting for crosswinds. So that when we pass over like fields, there's going to be breezes blowing across that can be quite strong. And if we're going under overpasses or over or under bridges, tunnels similarly, and if we're near larger vehicles, especially in the summer, if we're going near big truckers and things like that, those can create a crosswind, and because the vehicle is so tall and wide, that has more of a chance of tipping it over than if you were in your own smaller personal vehicle. So let's talk a little bit more about the bubble. Safe following distance, that's going to be 4 seconds behind, but when the roads are bad, we increase that to 6 seconds. How do we calculate it? We first look at a vehicle in front of us, and it's going to pass a fixed object, so maybe a mailbox, and then we're counting 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, and that's when we should be hitting the line of sight with that same fixed object. That's how you can tell you're 4 seconds behind a vehicle. especially this comes in important with larger commercial vehicles. Yes, I'm talking about, big trucks with 8 wheels or whatever, the big trucker trucks, trailer trucks, but also with large vans, maybe utility vehicles, things like that. The rule of thumb is if you cannot see their mirrors, their side mirrors, you're in a blind spot. So avoid being in their blind spot. This means you're going to need to be farther back from them, especially be cautious of their wide right-hand turns. If they're turning, even if they're in the far lane and you're going to be in the smaller lane, they can jackknife, and you can get caught in that. So avoid turning during their wide right-hand turns at the same time and wait around. Also, when we're stopping, like I already mentioned for bubble, but let's get a little more specific about it. As we're coming to a stoplight, there's other vehicles in front of us. You should stop in time that you can see not only their tires, but a patch of pavement behind them as well. And that's when you know you've got a safe bubble between the two of you. Okay, and now this is, accounting for crosswinds and those kinds of things. So how are we going to reduce rollover? And that's going to be by slowing below posted limits. So yes, it says you can go 80 on the highway, but at maximum in these vans, you should be going 60 miles per hour, especially when you have the kids in the van. You just have a lot of other lives you're responsible for at that point, and you should just be taking it slower because crashes can be worse in these vehicles, and it takes longer to slow it down or maneuver with it, right? Especially we want to be slow way below that limit when we're doing turns, when the road conditions are poor. If we are up on a rural road, a dirt road, if we're driving on a shoulder or there's a ditch next to us, or we're alternatively on the other side near an embankment, or if we're going on off and on ramps, right? So in all of these times, we really want to be below the posted limit. I have had calls from community members as well saying your van was going 80, even if the speed limit's 80, that is too fast for our vans to be going. It's reckless driving. And it is not as safe as doing it in a personal vehicle. Okay, some more driving practices. You need to be able to do head counts. Oftentimes we're using the vans, we're transporting kids. So as they're getting in the vehicle, okay, I've got 15 kids in the vehicle. 15 kids are buckled up. Okay, great. Everybody's still here. As they exit the vehicle, great. All the 15 are still here. And once we've arrived to the destination, they get out of the van and into the building. Great. My 15 are still here. So lots of head counts. Cell phones, obviously, it's Montana state law. We shouldn't be using them in the vehicle. We're setting examples for kids. We need it to be safe. So if you're using it for GPS, do it before. If you need to take a call or adjust your GPS, we park and we do it while the vehicle is parked. Okay, before entering an intersection, you want to scan every direction and cover the brake so that you could brake it at short notice. Things we're looking for in there, changing traffic signals, vehicles running red lights, or making a right turn on red, things that are a little bit unexpected but happen, pedestrians or bicyclists or animals. We're also going to be looking for trains and buses, those big vehicles that need more time or have more blind spots, right? Okay, if we're going to be turning, you want to turn signal continuously at least 100 feet before turning. So this is maybe more than you're used to doing. Maybe you already do this, but be intentional about it. Know where you're headed ahead of time and give a lot of warning with your turn signals. When changing lanes, you're always going to want to check your blind spots. Here's how you do it in your van. You first lean forward in your seat to change your side angle, and then you turn your head, whichever direction you're turning, right? You're going to need to watch for animals, especially when we're going on the highways in the summer. And then in the case that this happens, and let's hope that it does not, if your van's wheels drop off the roadway, you gradually reduce your speed and steer back onto the roadway when it is safe too. Things you need to avoid: panicked steering and hard braking, which is overcorrecting. So you might be jerking it back on. You're going to cause more harm than good. Or hard braking because you're scared about the situation. It's much easier if on the van, if it gently slows itself down rather than a jerk stop, which can cause a reaction. Also, keeping both hands on the wheel, right? they say 9 and 3 or 8 and 4. This also is going to, reduce arm fatigue and driving injuries if we keep our hands on the wheel, as well as we're going to maintain more control over the vehicle. Here's a little expectation setting for kids in the vans. They should enter in an orderly fashion, sit down, buckle up right away. This is something you might not have considered, but in a big van like this, it's best if we distribute from side to side and kind of balance, as well as sit towards the front of the vehicle rather than stacked up on the back of the vehicle, right? So kind of consider those dynamics. And then kids should remain seated while the vehicle's in motion, follow the driver's instructions, keep their body parts inside the vehicle at all times, keep the aisle clear, quiet. So, different rides, different days, different energy levels. However, my rule of thumb is always that no screaming in the car. We save that for like emergencies, right? And it should never distract the driver, right? And the driver should really be able to hear everybody in the van. So soft conversation's okay. Playing music's okay, but when it starts to get really excessively loud and you wouldn't be able to drive safely because of the distraction in the vehicle, that's when we have issues. Be respectful and courteous, and then when leaving, leave in an orderly way. And importantly, I often say, oh, we're in a parking lot, so be car aware, right? Here's a slide on jumping a dead battery should you need to. I'm not going to read through it now because you can take a picture of this. You can also save that on your phone or look it up should that situation happen. But most of our vans are fairly new, and hopefully we don't get into the situation. This would probably be if like you'd left things running in the vehicle for too long, or like left lights on or something like that. So those are the slides on vans. I'm gonna stop recording now.